In 1963, the Louvre did something extraordinary. They X-rayed a painting, not because it was damaged, not because they suspected a forgery, but because Salvador Dalí, one of the most famous and most controversial artists of the 20th century, had spent 30 years insisting that the painting contained something that nobody else could see, something hidden beneath the surface, something that changed everything about what the painting meant. The painting was the Angelus by Jean-François Millet, painted between 1857 and 1859. A simple image: two peasants standing in a field at dusk, heads bowed in prayer, a church bell ringing in the distance. The most reproduced painting in 19th century France. Familiar to the point of invisibility, the X-rays found a rectangular shape in the lower center of the composition, a shape that had been painted over. The Louvre never officially explained what it was. To understand what the X-rays may have found, you have to go back to the beginning. Not to Millet, to Dalí. In the early 1930s, Salvador Dalí became fixated on the Angelus, not admiring it, not studying it, fixated on it in the specific way of someone who is certain that an image contains a truth that its surface refuses to reveal. He saw the two peasants, a man and a woman standing in a field, heads bowed, hands clasped, and he did not see prayer. He saw grief. He saw two people standing over something. Something in the ground between them. Something they were mourning, not thanking God for. He saw, in the bowed heads and the clasped hands and the specific quality of stillness in the two figures, the posture not of gratitude, but of bereavement. He believed the painting showed a couple burying their child. This is not as absurd as it sounds. Look at the painting carefully. The two figures are not standing together. There is a space between them, a deliberate, specific space. Their heads are bowed not in the relaxed gratitude of a harvest prayer, but in the tense, contained grief of people holding themselves together in public. The man's hat is in his hands, not on his head, held before him in the specific posture of a man at a graveside. The woman's hands are clasped so tightly that her knuckles are white. Not the loose joining of hands in prayer, but the rigid grip of someone suppressing something. The basket on the ground beside them contains potatoes, but the basket is almost empty. Too empty for a harvest prayer, as if the harvest is not the reason they are standing there. And between the two figures and the earth between their feet, there is a small rectangular disturbance in the ground, or there was, before Millet painted over it. Dalí was so convinced of his reading that he wrote an entire book about it. He called it The Tragic Myth of Millet's Angelus. He described in extraordinary detail the way the painting produced in him a sensation of overwhelming, sourceless dread, the specific feeling of being in the presence of something that is not what it appears to be. He subjected the painting to what he called paranoiac critical analysis, a method he had developed for extracting hidden meanings from images by systematically applying interpretive pressure until the image revealed its alternative content. Under paranoiac critical analysis, the Angelus did not show peasants praying. It showed a praying mantis ritual. The praying mantis, the insect that devours its mate after copulation, was one of Dalí's central obsessions. He saw in the female mantis the image of the devouring mother, the figure who destroys what she loves, the embrace that is also a consumption. And in the two figures of the Angelus, the woman slightly larger, slightly more dominant, her posture slightly more composed while the man holds his hat in submission, he saw the same dynamic. He saw a woman standing over the body of what she had consumed. He pressured the Louvre to examine the painting. In 1963, they did. The X-rays revealed a rectangular shape in the lower center of the composition. It was approximately the size of a small coffin, or a cradle. The Louvre's official position was that the shape was the remains of an earlier compositional element that Millet had painted over during his revisions of the work. They did not specify what the element was. They did not publish the full X-ray analysis. They noted the finding and moved on. Dalí considered this a confirmation. Art historians have been arguing about it ever since. What did Millet actually intend? Jean-François Millet was not a painter of allegory or symbolism in the conventional sense. He was a painter of the rural poor, of the physical reality of peasant life in 19th century France, of the specific weight of agricultural labor, of the bodies of people who work the land. He painted the Angelus between 1857 and 1859. He had originally intended to paint a couple praying over a basket of potatoes, thankful for the harvest. The image went through multiple revisions before reaching its final form. In his letters, Millet described the painting as a memory of his grandmother, of how she would make him stop work whenever the church bell rang for the Angelus prayer and bow his head in gratitude. The painting, he said, was about that moment of pause, that brief interruption of labor for prayer. This is the official reading. The painting about gratitude and faith and the rhythm of rural life. But Millet also lost a child. He and his wife had 9 children. Not all of them survived. The specific grief of a parent who has buried a child was not abstract to him, and the rectangular shape under the painting, whatever it was placed exactly where a small grave would be if the 2 figures were standing over one. There is another detail that the conventional reading passes over. The church in the background. The church is not in the middle distance. It is very far away. The bell that calls the peasants to prayer is ringing from a church that is barely visible on the horizon. In the standard reading, this is simply atmospheric. The church is a part of the rural landscape. The bell connects the workers in the field to the religious community of the village. But in Dalí's reading, the distance of the church means something else. The figures are not going to church. They are not walking toward prayer. They are standing in a field, far from the church, far from the community, alone together over something in the ground. The bell is not calling them to prayer. It is tolling. Dalí's obsession with the Angelus lasted his entire life. He returned to it again and again in his own paintings, quoting it, distorting it, using it as raw material for his own investigations into the relationship between surface and depth, between what an image shows and what it conceals. He reproduced the 2 figures in dozens of his own canvases, always slightly wrong, always slightly threatening, always with the specific quality of something that is not quite what it appears to be. He could not let it go, because he believed Millet had done something that very few painters had ever managed to do, had painted a truth so dark and so specific that he had immediately covered it over, buried it under a more acceptable image, hidden it beneath a surface that the world would be comfortable looking at. A dead child beneath a harvest prayer. Grief beneath gratitude. The thing that cannot be said, painted and then painted over, still present under the surface for anyone willing to look. The painting arrived at the Louvre in 1909, purchased for a sum that was, at the time, the highest price ever paid for a painting at auction. It had already been famous for 50 years by then, reproduced in every format imaginable, hung in millions of French homes, used in political posters and religious pamphlets and educational materials. The image of French rural virtue and Catholic faith, the painting that everyone knew, the painting that nobody had looked at carefully enough to notice the posture of the man's hands, the whiteness of the woman's knuckles, the emptiness of the basket, the space between the 2 figures, the small disturbance in the earth between their feet, the rectangular shape that the Louvre found and never explained. Millet died in 1875. He left no statement about what the rectangular shape was. He left no explanation of the painting beyond the letters about his grandmother and the Angelus bell. Dalí died in 1989. He left the book, he left the dozens of paintings that quote the Angelus in their distorted way, he left the question. And the painting has been standing in the Louvre ever since, with its 2 figures and their bowed heads and their white knuckles and the space between them and the church tolling in the distance, waiting for someone to look at it the way Dalí looked at it. Not as an image of gratitude, as an image of everything that gratitude covers over. The next time you see the Angelus, in a reproduction in a museum in one of the millions of prints that hung in French homes for a century, look at the man's hands. Then look at the woman's knuckles. Then look at the space between their feet. And ask yourself whether what you are looking at is a prayer for what has been given, or a grief for what has been taken. The Louvre X-rayed the painting. They found something. They never said what it was. If this changed the way you see a painting you thought you already understood, share it with someone who thinks they know what prayer looks like. And if you want to go deeper into the artists, the secrets, and the masterpieces that contain the truths we were never supposed to find, subscribe to Hidden Canvas. The bell was never ringing for harvest.